Today, we're going to dive into the mystery of putting on a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gi. Okay, putting on a gi isn't really that complicated, but there are some things that are supposed to be done a certain way, and if you're new to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you might not be aware of these. Even if you've been doing BJJ for a while, you might not be aware of these. So with this video, I'll save you the time and the headache of having to learn from trial and error and share the basics of putting on a BJJ gi along with some tips that I've learned over the years. Let's go. Welcome to Health and Wealth Explorer. My name's Wade and I'm a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt with nearly 20 years of training experience. So needless to say, I've put on a gi many times. And even though it's not that difficult to put on a gi, it can still be a bit confusing, especially if you're brand new to BJJ. The main situation where I've seen this come up over the years is in the case of brand new students or maybe students coming in for a trial class and they come into the locker room to change clothes before class and they've never put on a gi before. Maybe they were just handed a gi and said, here, go put this on for class. And they were back there and they're fumbling around with the jacket and the pants and the belt and they just have no idea what to do. Now, this might seem a little bit crazy if you've been doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for a while, but I think sometimes we forget what it was like to be that brand new student putting on a gi for the first time and wondering, what goes where? How exactly am I supposed to do this? So let's go ahead and break it down. So let's start with what you should wear underneath your gi, and let's start with the bottom. So it's pretty common for people to wear some sort of boxer brief type shorts or compression shorts underneath their gi pants. Some folks do prefer to wear full leg length grappling tights or leggings, also called spats. The benefit of wearing full leg length grappling tights is that they give you more coverage and more skin protection and some compression if you're looking for compression on the legs. The downside is they can tend to make you a little bit hot. So they might be good for the winter, maybe not so great for the summer. Ultimately, it's going to come down to personal preference. And I can tell you for me personally, there have been times or periods in my life where I've regularly worn grappling tights underneath my gi pants. But in most cases, I'm typically just wearing some sort of compression shorts or boxer briefs. The one thing I do want to emphasize though is avoid wearing any sort of really baggy shorts like gym shorts underneath your gi pants. Trust me, you do not want all that extra material in there. It's just going to get bunched up and sweaty and make you hot and uncomfortable, and you don't want that. So now let's move on and talk about the upper body. On top, you should wear a rash guard. A rash guard is a compression or relatively form-fitting top that's usually made of polyester or some similar material. And as the name suggests, it's to guard your skin from rashes. More accurately, it's going to help prevent your skin from getting irritated from having the gi top rubbing against it during grappling. Back when I first started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or at least at the school where I first started Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, wearing rash guards underneath your gi top wasn't really a thing. I probably trained for a year or maybe two before I even wore a rash guard for the first time. We were all just running around bare-chested underneath our gi tops. But these days, I always, 100% of the time, wear a rash guard underneath my gi top. Not only do I find it more comfortable and it does keep the gi top from rubbing against your skin, but the school I currently train at actually requires students to wear a rash guard underneath their gi, and I think that's probably the norm these days. It's considered more proper and more hygienic as it helps reduce skin-to-skin contact during grappling. Now that said, a lot of high-level competitions do not allow male competitors to wear a rash guard underneath their gi top during competitions. It's different for female competitors, but for male competitors, you're required in a lot of high-level competitions to not wear a rash guard. Now, similar to what we saw with the lower part of the body, you have some options on the upper part of the body too. So option number one would be to wear a short sleeve rash guard like what I'm wearing right now. And the other option would be to wear a full arm length long sleeve rash guard. And again, just like we saw with the lower part of the body in the case of compression shorts versus grappling tights, it's going to come down to personal preference. Some people prefer to have the full length coverage. Again, it's maybe some compression, more protection for the skin, but the trade-off is it's probably going to make you a little bit warmer during training. The flip side is some people might find the short sleeve rash guard to be a little bit more comfortable, a little cooler underneath the gi, but ultimately it's just going to come down to your own personal preference. Now, just as I advised against wearing gym shorts underneath your gi pants, I'm going to advise against wearing a regular cotton t-shirt underneath your gi top. The reason why is your cotton tops, your cotton t-shirts tend to get stretched out, soaked with sweat, and just really, really hot and uncomfortable during training. So one piece of advice for sure, avoid the cotton t-shirt underneath. If it's not at the end of the world if you're in a pinch and you have to wear something underneath and all you have is a regular old cotton t-shirt, fine. But on a regular basis, invest in a good rash guard. Don't wear a big, sopping, sweaty, soggy, uncomfortable cotton t-shirt underneath your gi. Now let's move on to the actual gi, and again, let's start with the bottom. Putting on gi pants is pretty straightforward. It's just like putting on any other pair of pants. It's the tying of the pants that tends to give people problems. Nearly all gi pants that you come across are going to have a drawstring to tie them. That said, there are some exceptions. There are some gi brands or specific models from specific brands that have something a little different going on top. So one I can think of off the top of my head is Origin. I've had some of their gis in the past, and they do have an option for gi pants that are more like just regular everyday pants. So they have a Velcro fly, they have belt loops and a belt that loops around and connects in the front with a plastic buckle. But things like that are definitely the exception. The vast majority of gi pants that you come across will have a drawstring to tie them. Now, one thing people tend to struggle with is getting their pants tight enough. So here's a simple thing you can do to fix that. Where most people go wrong is they'll just take these ends of the drawstring and tie them and pull as tight as they can and tie them like you would tie a pair of shoes. And that works. And you can get them reasonably tight that way. But the thing is, this drawstring loops all the way around your body and comes out the front again. So what you want to do is follow this drawstring around to the back where it goes into the back of the pants, and then pull out from here. And you'll feel your pants tighten up pretty quickly that way. And now you have some slack here in the drawstring, and you just follow that around to the front and pull them tight. And then from here, you can move forward just as if you were tying your shoes. And most folks will go and do just that, but what I like to do is actually put a little knot right here because, I hate having my pants come untied during training. So I'll tie a knot there to keep it locked in, and then I'll go ahead and finish tying them up. Now, one thing I've noticed is that no matter how tight I get my pants and I tie them in a knot, once you get moving around and the material starts stretching out and you've been doing some training, it'll loosen up just a little bit. So I might have to untie this one time during the early part of class or of a training session, and then just retie it again, pull it tight, tie it in a knot. At that point, I'm pretty much good to go for the rest of class, and my pants never come untied. Tying my pants this way actually used to be kind of a pain back in the day because pants used to have these flat drawstrings, and I would tie my pants in a knot even then because I hated my pants coming untied during training. But once those flat drawstrings got, wet from sweat, it was like they were just glued in there. You could not get them untied. So if I tied my pants in a knot and then I wanted to retie them later, getting that knot untied was tough. Fortunately, most gi pants these days will come with a round cord drawstring that's super easy to tie and untie. So if you tie your pants in a knot, as I just mentioned, it's not going to be a big deal to quickly untie it, retie it during the course of class without too much disruption. And one other tip here, before you wash your gi, and you should wash your gi after every single class, tie the drawstring of your pants in a knot. I mentioned a moment ago how the drawstring of the pants kind of starts in the front and loops all the way around the body and comes out the front. If it comes out during the wash, it's kind of a pain to put back in. I'm sure many of us have had that experience of washing a pair of gym shorts or something like that, or sweatpants, only to find that the drawstring has come out. It's a pain to put those back in. It's even more of a pain to put the drawstring back in a pair of gi pants. So save yourself that headache and tie your drawstring pants in a knot before you wash them. Okay, now let's move on to the top and talk about the gi jacket. And like the gi pants, putting on a gi jacket is pretty straightforward because you put it on just like you would any other kind of jacket. The question is, then what? The main thing to know here is that when you put on a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Gi jacket, the right side lapel goes down first, and then the left side lapel goes on top. So you should have left over top of right. That's it. Pretty easy, right? So now let's move on to the final step, and probably the most confusing step, the belt. This is where I see beginners struggle the most, and if no one's ever shown you how to tie a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu belt, it might seem like a little bit of a puzzle. And trust me, I've seen some pretty creative solutions to this puzzle over the years. There are actually a number of different ways to tie a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu belt, and like some of the other things we've already talked about, it's ultimately going to come down to personal preference. But whichever way you choose, they're all really just variations of the same general concept. I'm not going to go into all the different ways you can tie your belt in this video. I'm not even sure I know all the different ways you can tie your belt. But what I will do is I'll show you how I tie my belt, and you can let me know in the comments what you think, if you like it, or if you tie your belt differently. When it comes to tying the belt, the main thing to know is that you need to start from the front, wrap it around your body, and end up with roughly equal lengths of belt on each side. So let's do that. So if I take the belt, I'm going to start from the front, left lapel over top of right lapel. I'm going to loop it around my body and come out with approximately equal lengths in the front. And one thing I like to do is then take this part and kind of slide it underneath and just true everything up here so that it lays nice and flat. Not a big deal if you don't. Some people don't bother. I just happen to like my belt to lay nice and flat and smooth all the way around my body. Now, once you get to this point where you're ready to tie the knot, this is kind of where all the variations come in. And I'll show you the way I do it, but this is by no means the only way to do it. So you're going to take this part, cross it underneath everything here. And once you get to here, this is where most of the variation is going to come in, is how people tie the actual knot. The simplest way is to just simply tie a knot, right? No big deal. It's fast and it's easy. But for me, I have this belt from Kitaro that I really like. If you're not familiar with Kitaro, they make great belts. I had a Kitaro belt for my brown belt and a Kitaro belt now for my black belt. And they are very thick, chunky belts, and I really like that. But the downside to that is that it's very easy for them to come untied, especially when they're brand new and not broken in. So I like to tie my belt in a way that locks the tips down and helps prevent the belt from coming untied so much. So rather than just loop it around in a knot, what I do is I take this end here that's in my right hand and I put it in between the two layers of belt where it was wrapped around my body, right? And then I take this part in my left hand and I feed it through this little loop I just made, and then also feed it through the two layers of belt that wrap around my body. And you can see I'm here, and now these are in between, and you can, again, kind of move this around and get it to where you want it so that everything's even. And once you're satisfied, you just pull it tight. And what happens is, as you tighten up this knot, it helps to lock in these ends. Now, it's not perfect. You know, belts always come untied during training. That's just the nature of a belt. But what you can do is try to minimize the number of times that it comes untied and that you have to retie your belt during training. And I think this does a good job of doing that by locking down the tips. And that's why I choose to tie my belt this way. Now, a bonus to tying your belt this way, if you have kids who do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I have 2 kids who do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and especially when they were younger and they couldn't tie their belts on their own, I would tie their belts this way before class, and trust me, their belts never came untied. So while some of the other kids in class would lose their belts and have to wait for their parents to come tie them for them, I would tie them once at the beginning of class, and that was it. Their belts would never come untied. So this is how I like to tie my belt. Again, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it, and it's all going to come down to personal preference. I happen to like this one. Now, before we wrap up, I have 2 lesser known tips about the belt to share. Early in my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu journey, I was told by an old school Brazilian BJJ legend of sorts that when you tie your belt, you should always have the rank sleeve on the left side of your body. Now, admittedly, I've talked with lots of BJJ practitioners over the years, and most of them had never heard that. But that's something that always stuck with me. So whenever I tie my belt, I always make sure to have the rank sleeve on the left side. Now, in order to have the rank sleeve end up on the left side of your body, you need to start out with it on the right side. So as you're tying your belt, have the rank sleeve on the right, and then as you loop it around your body and tie the knot, it will ultimately end up on the left side of your body. One other thing that I picked up somewhere along the way is that the edge of the belt that's stitched together should be facing down when your belt is tied. Now what I mean by that is if you look closely at your belt, you'll see that there's one edge where the belt is folded over and it's smooth, and then the other edge of the belt where those two sides are stitched together. So that side where they're stitched together should be facing down, and the edge that's smooth, where it's folded, should be facing up. So whenever I put on my belt, I always make sure that the smooth folded edge is facing up, that the rank sleeve is on the right, and then as I tie my belt, loop it around, tie the knot, the rank sleeve ends up on my left and the smooth edge is facing up. So that's it. You now know everything you need to know about putting on a BJJ Gi, from what to wear underneath, to how to tie your belt, and everything in between. Let me know in the comments if you've ever heard those last two tips about having the rank sleeve on the left and having the smooth edge of the belt facing up. I'm curious how many other folks out there have heard that and how many people obsess about stuff like that the way I do. And if you found this video helpful, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It would be greatly appreciated and it would really help the channel. Thank you, and we'll catch you in the next video.